Hello, everyone. Welcome to Microsoft Reactor. Hello to our in-person audience and hello to our virtual audience. This is a hybrid event. So we do have some people sitting down here at Reactor London who've just enjoyed some amazing pizzas as well. So you're missing out. So next time, please do come in person so you can enjoy some pizzas on the house. So Reactor is a community hub. We do workshops, trainings, hackathons, all for developers, and they are all free to attend. I don't know if any of you have previously come to an event at the Reactor, but we're all about upskilling the developer community. A couple of housekeeping. Toilets are at the back. There's 2 fire exits, one where you came through from and one just directly at your back. And with that, I'm actually now going to hand over to Ben, but before that, there's code of conduct I need to explain to our virtual audience. So we're all here to learn, so please be respectful of other people's views and understanding of differences, and please be kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat will be open throughout for our virtual audience, and obviously our in-person audience, please feel free to ask as many questions as you like. And with that, I'm now going to hand over to Ben.
Thank you, Rav. So, thanks again for all of you for coming here to the London Reactor event. We've been holding 10 of these in total. This is the second but last. We've had events in Seattle, San Francisco, Tel Aviv, all over the world. So I'm privileged to be presenting the London event. So yeah, thanks again for coming here today. Out of interest, how many of you are actually local from London, or have any? All of you? Okay, good. Just good to know. Right, and how many of you have experience with Xamarin or Xamarin Forms or MAUI even? One. Good. Okay. So this will be good. That's the point of this. This is an introduction to MAUI, so you're in the right place to get a heads up on what MAUI is and what it can provide for you. So with that, my name is Ben Buttigeig. I'm a senior software engineer on the .NET Client Customer Advisory team. I've been at Microsoft for nearly 7 years now, working with various enterprise customers, helping them develop mobile applications, mostly in the Xamarin Forms ecosystem, but now obviously working with .NET MAUI. So, and that's why we're here today. So the agenda is we're going to be having an overview of what .NET MAUI is and what it can provide, some of the improvements that have been made with the platform, and with Visual Studio, what the benefits that you get with using VS 2022. We'll do a deep dive into how MAUI works and the framework that and the base class libraries that are provided by it. And we'll do a small workshop at the end of it for those that stick around, those of you here with me today. So let's start at the beginning. So .NET is what Microsoft has focused on. We develop and improve and have a unified development platform called .NET, which is used to develop platforms for and solutions for every platform you can imagine. So for cloud, for web, desktop, mobile, gaming, if you want to create an Xbox game, IoT, and AI. So if you want to create a solution, you can do it in .NET. There's a great ecosystem backing it up, open source community that provides anything that might be missing from that from the off-the-shelf support that's provided with .NET, and then we obviously have all the tooling support to back it up. And you can develop all these solutions in your favorite languages, either C#, F#, even VB. Any VB developers here? No. Okay. But what we're focused on today is the mobile side of .NET. So developing applications for desktop, for mobile, tablet, and even watch. So that's my background. That's what I've been working on for several years now. My original background was in WPF. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that. It was the origination of XAML, which is a the markup language which is used for defining the UI for MAUI applications. And it's had a long evolution, but yes, its origins begin with WPF. Yes, so many years ago, that's how I started developing applications, and have loved working in this ecosystem. It's provided me lots of opportunities and an experience working with customers, developing some really cool applications. So now we're working with MAUI, .NET MAUI, which .NET MAUI is the most productive way to develop native apps that perform great on any device that runs Android, iOS, macOS, or Windows from a single code base. The aim of MAUI is to provide you all the tools you need and give you access to a huge ecosystem of third-party tools and open source libraries to help you bring your vision to reality. So it's backed up by your shared code, and you can develop your applications using C# across all of these platforms. So you have all your business logic is shared across every single platform. You're not having to duplicate or worry about the platform specifics for each individual platform that you're targeting. You can just focus on developing the functionality that's unique to your application. And that allows you to, the other benefits of MAUI is that it gives you access to the low-level APIs. So when you do care about specifics on the platforms, you can access those native APIs still using C#. So you don't have to worry about having to learn Objective-C or Swift, or on Android, Kotlin, for instance, to access the fingerprint scanner on an Android device. You can just write your code in C# and access those native APIs in C#. So how does MAUI work? Well, everything starts with your app code. So this is the area that you want to focus on. This is the area that you want to spend the majority of your time creating the application, the unique experience of your application. Somehow you need to be able to target these individual devices, be it Android, iOS, Mac, or Windows, and have the experience working the same across all of those devices. So how does your .NET code that you write in your app code, how does that end up on a iOS device, for instance? Well, that's where the .NET runtime comes in. So the .NET runtime essentially acts as a translator for your .NET code, your C# code. So it does all the hard work of dealing with the language differences between all those different platforms. So all you have to worry about is the C#. That is then backed up by the BCL, which is a huge library of common, the base class library of all the common controls that's within the .NET framework, within .NET 6. And then on top of that, we then expose the specific libraries for each individual device. So whereas the base class library, the BCL, is all the common classes, for instance, string conversion, that kind of thing, diagnostics, debugging. .NET for Android allows you access to the Android APIs, so it exposes them, it creates bindings for each one of those platforms. So for iOS, Android, and WinUI, you can always drill down to those specific native APIs. And then finally, you have the UI, which you define using MAUI. So MAUI allows you to define a UI using XAML, which is an XML markup language, or C#. And we have a huge, rich library of controls to back up and to aid the quick development of your application. So out of the box, you get 40 controls, a lot of the ones that you'd expect to get. So entries, sliders, flyouts, buttons, obviously, text, labels, the list goes on. And here's a good example of how that works in practice. So on iOS, you have a UI activity indicator. The same control on Android is called a progress bar. But in the MAUI world, all you have to care about is the activity indicator, and it will worry about converting it to the appropriate control. Another example, the UI slider on iOS, seek bar on Android. It's just a slider in the MAUI world. So you get the idea that we have this abstraction layer which allows you to just have to worry about one type of control across all the platforms. So here you can see the huge range of controls that you have at your disposal out of the box. Then there's MAUI is optimized for MVVM. So is anyone familiar with MVVM? Okay, a couple of you. So this is a way to allow you to have a separation of concerns and separate out the UI from your business logic. So you have a dedicated UI. So you can, for web developers, for anyone who's familiar with Blazor, for example, you'd have your the web page, the HTML, the eraser, separated from your business logic. So that allows you to then independently unit test the back end, the business models, and in this case, view models, separate from the UI. So let me just back up a second for that. So you can see here we have a stack layout. So I should explain how XAML works for anyone who's new to it. So we have layout controls, which in this case will lay out a label and button vertically. And then we have a clicked handler, which will be bound to a view model using the command pattern. So that allows, and then we have a execute handler, which will then execute when the button is being clicked. So that's a fairly trivial example, and I'll go through a demo which will hopefully help solidify and make that clearer. So we have a huge number of layouts. Here's just a small number of them. We have pages, as the name suggests. The high-level overview of an application is broken down into pages, and then you can then subdivide individual pages using layouts. So we have commonly used controls such as stack layouts, and grids are very common in many applications I work with. But you may find use for absolute in some cases and relative. So any questions so far? Layouts? No, okay. So yeah, there's abundant styling options. So one fantastic feature of MAUI is that you have a support for a resource dictionary, which allows you to define things like styling for light and dark mode, and allow dynamic styling based off various states. So you can have like a visual state manager, which will control how views are displayed, how views are styled based off the state. So you can imagine, for example, when you're hovering over an element or you're tapping it and its state changes, the state manager can control what style the controls appear in and what style is being used based off that state. There's also built-in support for fonts and images. Now, this is something that used to be quite problematic, believe it or not, in previous releases in Xamarin Forms, for example, where we'd have to include copies of the fonts and images on every platform that we're targeting. So that's now something that you don't have to worry about. You just have a single project where you include your fonts, your images, and now that MAUI takes care of scaling and ensuring that all those resources are accessible from a single location. So that's one huge improvement in MAUI. So there's one of the biggest changes in MAUI is the handler architecture. So the new handler architecture makes it easy to hook into and modify behavior directly from from MAUI. So you can see here we have an if-def, so you can have platform-specific code. Using the handler architecture, we can access any your handler from anywhere, and and then we use a dictionary to map what properties are modified based off the platform. So that's another thing I'll touch on. So if that's not clear, I'll show you that in the actual MAUI code. Another awesome feature of MAUI is that we have a graphics library built in to allow pixel perfect control of the UI. So we support Skier Sharp, which is a highly performant graphics library and supports things like animation. And you can see here an example here of how we're controlling the UI and have an Android, iOS, and WinUI application looking identical using this MAUI graphics API. So here we see another example of some XAML here. I thought it was useful for you to see how you can construct a fairly complex UI using some basic XAML. So we can see here we've got a vertical stack layout with some padding defined, and then we have 3 labels stacked vertically with a button below it and then an image below that. And notice that we have the source of the image is a PNG, so there's support for PNGs, for JPEGs, and for SVGs. And obviously, the beauty of using SVGs is that they're fully scalable. So that's definitely something you should take advantage of with this. Any questions on this view? Yep. Yes, yeah, exactly. So as you can see here, we've got, so that's one of the benefits of the MAUI layout system, is that it will automatically use a DPI, so it will use device pixels to scale based off the target device. So you can see here that there's no changes made to the font size for any of the platforms. It's automatically just scaled for each one. And yeah, sometimes you may find, okay, on Android, I want the font to be slightly bigger, and then you still have that option to be able to have that those tweaks if necessary. But yeah, out of the box, it'll be, I mean, there'll always be some variance based off the size of the phone, for example, and the DPI of the phone. So you may find, okay, I need that font to be a little bit bigger on these devices, and so you do have that flexibility. So yeah, that's a good question. Any others? Yep.
So there's a question online where it says, where can I find some more advanced examples of usage, certain features of a device, not Xamarin ones, but pure .NET MAUI, for instance, how to transfer data over USB?
Examples to transfer over USB. That's an interesting one. Yes, I do not off the top of my head know of sample SDK, so I guess we'd be looking for, yeah, I'm afraid I don't know of any APIs or SDKs for USB data transfers. Was that the question, just to be clear?
Yeah, so he says, can you see StreamYard on your device? No? Okay, that's fine. So say, yeah, where can I find more advanced examples of usage, certain features of a device?
Okay, so that I can answer. So yeah, there's a really, on the GitHub repo for the MAUI, so github.maui has a samples folder where you can see a number of examples. Also, Javier, one of the MAUI developers, we'll have to dig up the URL to his GitHub repo, but he collects a repository of in his GitHub repo of all of the samples that he finds. So he's collating all of the MAUI samples. So that might be a good place for you to look. Okay, but yeah, good question. Okay. So another thing to bear in mind is that MAUI runs natively on these devices. So it's not some it's not just drawing the elements on the screen, it's actually using the native controls. So we're getting high performance behavior because we're actually using the Android edit box, the Android sliders, and on iOS, we're running the iOS versions of those controls. And we're building and compiling the binaries to be deployed on those devices. So it's not like it's not interpreted. That's the key thing to bear in mind. This is a binary application. It's compiled down to packages that can be deployed directly on the devices. And for Android, new support that's been added is support for app bundles. So that's a new feature where you create a large componentized version of your application with all the resources for the different size of devices, and the store will handle and distribute for the users a cut down version, just the size of the application that you need on your specific device. So you don't have to download like the tablet version of all the resources. The store will handle and just allow you to download the bits that are required for your device. So it's a really cool feature that really saves a lot of bandwidth and storage space on the devices as well. So that's, if you're developing for Android, you definitely want to be adding support for app bundles on your device. So project system improvements. It's a really big change. I have just touched on this briefly, which is the benefits of font support, but this goes across a lot of features within MAUI. So previously, there'd be a separate project for every platform that you were targeting, plus the common shared project. So often, at a minimum, you would have 3 projects for every app solution that you were working on. That's now been reduced to 1, which is your app. And that app will now run on Android or iOS, and you just target, and you have shared resources. So if I show you here, you can see now that your app is just a single project, which includes all the resources and you can have platform specifics. So for example here, if you do care about a specific feature, platform specific feature, you can still add that, but you don't have to. The default isn't separate projects. It isn't separate platforms anymore. So that's really a huge improvement over previous versions of Xamarin Forms, for example. We also have a dedicated splash screen. This was also a very complicated thing to do in the past and would require, you wouldn't believe how much effort's required just to do a splash screen for iOS, for example. Now it's literally just you point to a PNG and it'll worry about all the scaling and how that splash screen will appear. Yeah, fonts, I've touched on this already, but here you can see this was another thing that used to be very complicated, including fonts for each platform. You'd have to have a version for each platform. Now you have a single resources folder, and you can literally just reference that font by name. It's super, super easy to use. And you can see here how you can just target your device. So if you plug in an iPhone, the support for hot restart, which means that even on a Windows PC, I can't demonstrate this today, unfortunately, because I was planning to, but yes, if the planets align, you can connect an iPhone and deploy it even from a Windows PC. It does work. I can show you individually, but unfortunately, because of the Wi-Fi, there's issues with screen sharing the phone. So that's the only thing that's prevented me from demoing that cool feature. So moving on, any questions before I move on to faster development? Oh, okay.
There's another, sorry. The virtual question says, by when can we expect .NET MAUI be generally available in VS for Mac?
Yeah, so I will be touching on VS for Mac, in fact, in the next couple of slides. So currently, we have full support for MAUI in Visual Studio 2022 for Windows. It's really full-featured. The debugging experience is great. On Mac, we're currently in preview, still in development, and the hope, well, I believe it should be available by November, but yeah, we're not recording this, are we? So, yeah, I believe the goal is to have it released by November, but yeah, the team are working hard to make sure that experience we get parity for both platforms. So yeah, they have written, so full disclosure, they've rewritten the Visual Studio for Mac from the ground up, so it supports ARM, so it runs on M1 as fast as possible, so it's highly optimized, but that has meant that there's been a lot of work to get it back up to parity, or, you know, for the same development experience. So for the time being, it's definitely recommended that if you are targeting MAUI today, using Visual Studio for Windows is probably your best experience. But yeah, it shouldn't be long before Mac catches up. But yeah, good question. Was there another question? Yep.
For the already written applications, maybe not necessarily from the legacy point of view, but the existing Xamarin code, is there a way of easy migrating one project to another?
Yeah, that's a good question. So obviously there's lots of existing Xamarin and Xamarin Forms applications, and many users will be looking to take advantage of some of the benefits I've spoken about with using MAUI. So it's absolutely possible, and it's one of the major things that I do within my customer engagements is helping customers find ways that they can migrate from their existing Xamarin Forms apps to MAUI. There are a number of ways you can approach it. There's a great FAQ online that talks you through at least 3 options which are available in order of preference. The first one is the Upgrade Assistant, which is currently in development, and so it unfortunately isn't. It will be the long-term preferred approach because it will basically automate. In theory, it will fully automate migrating an existing application and handle a lot of, because there's a number of changes between the old platform and the new, stuff like namespace changes, and obviously some of the folder structure changes I've mentioned. So in the absence of that approach, the 2 options available to you are to modify the CS proj files. So there's existing, the CS proj is what defines the project structure. You can modify that to match the MAUI style. And you'll have to make sure that all of the dependencies match up and that they have also been migrated to MAUI. So any dependencies, if you're using any third-party NuGets, they will need to have been upgraded to .NET 6. And the third option, which I'm currently working with a customer to do exactly this, and we've gone for the approach of creating a fresh MAUI application, so brand new solution, and then copy it across the majority of the code, the common code, and then it's a case of incrementally addressing any build issues, so updating the namespaces, so now using the MAUI namespaces. A lot of the XAML, so one of the beauties of this is that the XAML hasn't changed, so you can still use the old, any of the UI that was defined for Xamarin Forms, you can still use that. There's a couple of places where there's more optimal controls. For instance, stack layouts have now been optimized, so there's 2 new versions. There's a horizontal and a vertical stack layout, and if for little optimizations, you might want to look at using those case dependent. So yeah, another good question. Yeah. So. Yeah, so I mentioned VS 2022, so this is definitely the best tool for developing MAUI applications at the moment. We have the modern dev environment. It provides some awesome features like hot reload, which is something I'll demonstrate to you shortly. Live share, really awesome feature. In fact, this is one I've used a lot with customers. It's essentially allowed several developers to look at the exact same code and see, like anyone who's used OneNote or a tool like that where you can see everyone's cursors, or shared documents. It's essentially that for Visual Studio. So everyone can see, select code and actually modify the same code on someone's machine, so that they can see exactly what changes have been made. So this is really good for when a bunch of developers are trying to incrementally make a big change across the board. So we've found that's worked really well in some engagements using live share. Yeah, I mean, yes, without a doubt, as I say, it's the best experience. It's recently been updated to 64-bit architecture as well, so it's super fast and can handle huge scales of projects. And then we have VS for Mac, which I've touched on as well. This is how it currently looks. It is in development. It's currently in preview. You can download it today, but your mileage may vary, as we said, until we get it into stable support for MAUI. So yeah, here we can see the debug experience on Windows. You can see you have features like IntelliCode. You can see that changing colors. You can see hot reload working there as well. So we're modifying the XAML. We can make changes so you can do pixel perfect alignment of controls in the previewer. And you can see that all happening in real time. So it's a really good, fast and fluid kind of dev experience where you can see your changes happening in real time. You're not having to rebuild. And the way this works is this is actually running the application in the background and effectively screen sharing the running application in the previewer. And here we have, in fact, I didn't need to. Just turn it down. Sorry about that. A bit of a music interlude. So this is just demonstrating the iOS hot restart, which is the feature I was hoping to show you, but you can see a recording of it here. So you can get your iOS, so if you've got iOS developer account, provide your credentials, it will provision the device and allow you to deploy from a Windows machine directly to your iPhone, which is really cool. Because prior to that, you would have to have a Mac to do any iOS development at all. It's just like number one, you need a Mac. So yeah, this addresses that and allows you to at least have some development. You can't obviously deploy your apps to the store. There are some limitations to it, but it's definitely something that you can use, developers can use, and won't be stuck saying, well, I need a Mac. I can't do anything without it. So, yeah. So this was the more traditional way of doing it through the iOS simulator. So this would involve SSHing to a Mac Mini, or a MacBook Pro, and then running it on the device and then having the screens shared over SSH, so you can still interact with it via the simulator. And then I want to touch on all of the APIs that are available to you. So we have a huge number that are all exposed. So anything you can do on a device, if you're an iOS developer or an Android developer and that you take for granted that you can do, you can access the flashlight, the clipboard, the preferences, SMS, compass, you name it. It's all accessible to you as a MAUI developer. So they're all cross-platform and you can access them all via a shared common API. So here's a good example, app actions. You can see here how easy it is to define app actions. So this, and you can, they're like the context menus on your phone. So you can see the different, how they appear and how easy it is to define the set of app actions. And another great example, geolocation. So we have a single geolocation abstraction, which you can call and get the last known location. And if that fails, so the initial call that we have at the top is instantaneous. It's like, give me the one we currently have cached. So that'll be quick and responsive. So you imagine the user wants, okay, well, you have a location tracking application. Yeah, it'll return the cached version. If that fails, then it will do an asynchronous call to do all the device-specific requests necessary to triangulate. And that obviously can take a few seconds. So we have a timeout for that, and then that will return using the TPL, which is the task parallel library. There we go. Yes. Yeah, that allows you to do asynchronous calls in a really readable way. So we can see here. So this is an example of dependency injection. So this is another feature that's built into MAUI. Anyone familiar with dependency injection? 2 people. Okay. And maybe 2 people on the live stream as well, potentially. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So dependency injection, I'll try and summarize it as best I can. The point of dependency injection is to have a separation of concerns. So you have an interface which defines the feature. So in this case, geolocation. So we have an iGeolocation feature, and we have an implementation. So what we want to do is separate the implementation from the interface so that we can swap it out for a mocked version of that. So that allows unit testing, for example. So it means that for the real application, we have the real geolocation implementation. And so when you use it, you request back the iGeolocation. And because you've registered the real version, that's the version you'll get. But when you're doing your tests, you register a mock geolocation. So that will be a test version which just returns a fake location that implements iGeolocation interface. Yeah, the benefit of that is that your tests are super quick because they're not actually doing all that triangulation, all that kind of crazy stuff that could take seconds. But for the real application, the real thing. So yeah, that's one of the benefits of using dependency injection, and that comes for free. It's built into .NET MAUI. Did that make sense? The DI? Yeah, okay. It's not something you necessarily need to understand day one of your MAUI development experience, but it's definitely something you want to consider and be aware of when you start building up your applications, because it definitely helps to keep a good separation of concerns and to make your apps unit testable. So Blazor Hybrid. So this is a fantastic feature which allows you to, for any Blazor developers, any web developers, this allows them to be able to take advantage of their Blazor web dev experience and all the benefits that MAUI provide and combine them together to have a hybrid application. So essentially you end up with a MAUI host application which has access to all the low-level APIs. It will use all the native controls, but then it's hosting a Blazor application developed by using the technologies that you're familiar with. So yeah, as you can see here, it allows you to combine the best of both worlds. And yeah, this is essentially demonstrates how you can have that shared, the shared Blazor components within your application. So then there's the choice between whether you want to have you have from one side of the spectrum, you have your web development experience, so a pure website, which is accessible from a device, or you have the other extreme, which is a fully native MAUI application, and then you have the two combined So you have a web view which hosts your PWA, your Blazor application. And yeah, so finally, something I wanted to touch on here, as you can see here, we have a huge range of controls available to you out of the box, and you can have fine-grained control over graphics using the MAUI graphics library. But if that isn't enough for you, then you can access Skier Sharp, which will give you even more fine-grained control. So with that, I'm going to move on to a demo. Yes, I think we're good for time. So I'm now going to switch over, and hopefully this will work. We have the hold screen.
We had a question from the folks
Okay.
online.
Yes.
Plan for support for Windows ARM platform. So the answer we've gotten is yes, it's on the roadmap. It's a good news, and we can't promise any dates, but it's definitely on the roadmap.
Okay, so this is the bit you've been waiting for. Live coding. It's my favorite bit. So I'm going to show you creating an app from scratch. So you'll see the whole onboarding experience and how easy it is to create a MAUI application, and a functional one at that. So I always like to start from the Visual Studio installer, because for one of the benefits is it will keep you up to date of any updates that are available. And typically, I'll also have multiple versions of Visual Studio side by side. In this case, I'm just running the latest stable, which has all the support for .NET MAUI. So I'm going to create a new MAUI application. So we can see here the templates available are .NET MAUI app, .NET MAUI Blazor app, and a class library. So the names should be fairly self-explanatory. So if you're interested in doing Blazor apps, that's the one you use. In this case, I'm going to be showing you the standard .NET MAUI app. And I'm going to call it MAUI app 5, because I've done 4 more before that. So this is what you get out of the box. This is the standard template. We can see here it's just initializing, just downloading some dependencies. So we'll have the supported platform. So it's downloading a bunch of NuGets and packages. So we can see here it's just finished. So now all the triangles are gone. That's now completed. So I'm just going to show you what the application looks like, and then just to give you some context. So, but whilst that's going to build now. So I'm first of all going to target the local Windows machine. So I find this is the best developer experience even if you're targeting iOS or Android. In my experience, if you're working on UI controls or layouts, a good option for the quickest dev loop is to target Windows, even if it's just throwaway and it's not actually your target platform, because you're not having to worry about bundling the application and transferring it over USB or Wi-Fi or whatever onto your device. You can have it locally, and then you get the other benefit is that you can change your window sizes, your screen sizes, to simulate a device, a typical portrait form factor. And you can see how that layout works. So one of the things I wanted to demonstrate was the XAML live preview. So you can see the application here. That's it running. If I tap on the live preview, there we go. So that's the live running app in the previewer. So the benefit that you have of that is that you have things like you can find individual controls, and you can actually inspect individual elements and find their definition in the XAML. So for instance, this button, I'm just hovering over that, I can see the fonts, the sizing, the padding, color, etc. And I can tap on it and it takes me directly to the button. And I can see how it's constructed. And let me just pin that so we can see that permanently. I'm just going to move this around. Maybe over there, right. So there's a few things to note. We have a scroll view, which then contains a stack layout, vertical stack layout. So this is one of the new optimized stack layouts. Contains an image, a label, two labels, and a button. And I can obviously, in real time, change any one of these things. So we can say, that changes in real time. We can see, I don't know if you can still read that, but that's the application that's running here behind the screen. Notice also we have a black background. I currently don't have black set as so that you may expect to see, where do I set black for that background? What that's actually doing is that's using styles defined in the resources. And if I just look at styles here, you can see we have a huge number of built-in styles that come out of the box for like buttons. So we have, notice text colors defined. And notice that text color isn't just set a fixed color or background color, it's set an app theme binding. So what that does is that considers your OS theme. So out of the box, you've got theme styling, which means that if I switch back, currently I'm running, so because I've got small windows, I'm trying to think of a way to show you this with a smaller display. Current theme is, oh, where is it? Yeah, it's currently dark. Switch it to light. So this will change the whole OS, but it also changes the app. And that's responding instantly. And it's very bright. So let's change it back to dark because we're all developers and we need it dark. There we go. So that shows that app theme binding, how well that works. And this is a fully hot reloading application. How are we doing for time? Did we say 10, 15 minutes? Okay. Right, okay, so I need to think about wrapping up soon. Okay, right. So, yeah, we have about 10 minutes or so. So I'll just talk you through a few other elements. So one thing I wanted to show you was hot reload working. So we have a button here currently. I can add another button. We can see that getting added in real time. Doesn't have any text currently, so I can add some text. Button 2. Notice it fills the whole area. We won't worry about that. We'll just leave it as that. Now, I touched on the command pattern. That's so you'd use the command pattern for if you're following MVVM, and that would allow you to then execute commands from a separate view model, which is attached to your view. But in this case, we're just going to be using code behind. So I'm just going to call it clipped. And then I can F12. Excuse me. So that should auto-complete. Oh, that's why. Yes. There we go. It needs to be clicked. Thank you. So now it will auto-complete. complete now. I've changed it to a clicked handler. And sorry. Now if I have to, there we go. So I have 12 into that, and that will also generate the event handler in the code behind. So this is now a usable button. So if I were to click on it now, it would, in theory, hit the breakpoint. Okay, there we go, hit the breakpoint. So this is C# hot reload. So this is a new feature in MAUI. So previously, the best you could hope for with styling and making changes to your app is entirely in layout. It wouldn't involve anything in code. So now we can generate code, we can create event handlers, and even add breakpoints to those handlers and break on them. So let's actually do something useful though. So I'm going to be using the let's see. There's a Microsoft.MAUI.network. So there's a networking API. So this gives you access to the low-level APIs on the device. So whether it's Android, iOS, or in this case, Windows, we can see the network access. So we can actually see the current state so we want to do current. Network access. Oh, no, sorry. It's connectivity current. There we go. Yeah. And now it's network access. Yes, there we go. So it's this property. So we want to access this property. Well, before I do this, I should point out, notice that connectivity is highlighted in green. Does anybody know why that is? Class of. It's actually because it's the bit before it is redundant. You don't need to specify it because it's already being used. So there's already a using for that class to be accessed. So yeah, even though there are no, so this is the other thing to mention I didn't touch on, is that we now have this concept of implicit usings, which means that a lot of the classes and APIs that you would typically use, you don't have to explicitly specify them in your list of using. So in older Xamarin Forms style applications, you'd have a long list of using this namespace, and all the different classes that you're using. Now, for the commonly used ones, they're already included. So in this case, yeah, connectivity, current network access, that's all you have to do. So I'm now just going to check. I'm going to create a variable which is going to check is connected. And I'm going to put another breakpoint, F5 that. Hopefully that does work, or am I going to have to rebuild? No, I haven't. I just need to put a semicolon on the end. And anybody can see what I've done wrong. Okay, in this case, I think I will have to, yeah, so. Possibly. It will save it now, yeah. Yeah. So I was expecting it to hit the next breakpoint in this case. So I was expecting it to carry on running, and I think in this case he was right. I hadn't saved the changes automatically. So I take it with XAML changes, it will save them automatically. C# ones, it doesn't. So That's an interesting one to demo. There's another API I'm just going to demonstrate here, which is display alerts. So I'm going to show you how you can setting the title and the message. So what I can do is I can use string interpolation, and we can then pull in is connected as a variable in the string, and so that will convert it and put it in the alert. So if we're connected, it will say true. If it's not connected, it will say false. I just need to put a dismiss. Okay. So in theory, having changed that, the app is still running now. And if I save this time, and then click the click me button, there we go. So hit the breakpoint, and then I can F10 is connected, is true. And so if I F5 that, hit that breakpoint, so F5, and there we go, boom, alert. Now, important thing to note is this alert will be styled for the platform. So if it's on an iOS, it'll look like an iOS dialog. If it's on Android, likewise. So you get the idea, so that you have, it's very easy to do, relatively complicated things fairly easily. Any questions on that? I kind of rattled through that fairly quickly. But... No, any questions online? No? Okay, trying to think if there's anything else that's good to demonstrate before we move on. Yeah, okay, great question. So the question was, can you mimic these settings? Now that actually touches on it depends on what level you want to test. If you want to do integration testing, like full application, like UI level testing, then you need an automation framework to drive the UI. Another way to do it is using DI, Dependency Injection, which is what I touched on earlier. So that allows you to do exactly what you say, which is mimic, okay, how do I respond to a is connected state? How do I handle a not connected state? So you can then simulate all those different states in unit tests in really quick, because the problem with doing the automated UI tests is you've got to launch an application, you've got to see, you'll have to actually have a fully working application to drive through, whereas a unit test, you can test an individual piece and all the states for that. So that's yeah, a great question, and it's a really interesting subject of how do you fully test all the different states of an application. And so yeah, DI really helps with that, without a doubt. Any other questions? Good ones like that. Okay. Okay, because I need to move on with the slides. So let's get back to the slides then. I just have a few more to do, and then we'll move. We'll have a short break, and then we'll be doing a workshop on site. So, are we on the hold screen? Small intermission while I fix screen sharing. And go. Yes. Right. MAUI ecosystem. So one of the fantastic aspects of .NET, Xamarin Forms, and now MAUI is that it's got a great fan base, a great ecosystem. Lots of third-party open source developers have been passionate about .NET and Xamarin over the years. And so they've been really helping support and build an ecosystem around it, which has made it what it is today. So we have a huge number of, excuse me. So yeah, we have a huge library, a third-party library of controls, of tools, toolkits, the Xamarin community toolkit, and now the MAUI community toolkit, APIs. So a lot of the features that you don't necessarily get out of the box, you'll find someone's been working on an open source solution too. In fact, before we started this, the one question I had was, is there Linux support for .NET MAUI? Currently, there isn't, and there are no plans as yet to support Linux. But because .NET MAUI is open source, it's entirely open to someone to develop that. And I have no doubt that will happen. Yeah, watch this space for that. So yeah, there's a huge number of libraries. Here's a few examples I'm just going to touch on. So there's MAUI pane, which is a control for doing various dockable layouts. And you can see here some examples of the kind of layouts that you get with it, which you don't get out of the box. So if you wanted a dockable style layout, then MAUI pane is a solution for you. And it's just a NuGet. So if you're familiar with NuGet libraries, you just pull that in, and then you have it available across all your platforms. Comet. So this is a different, this uses the MVU architecture. Won't talk about this here, but this has been developed by James Clancy, one of my ex-colleagues on the Jetpack team. Super smart guy, and yeah, he's come up with this awesome way of representing your UI using the MVU pattern. And then we have a huge number of vendors supporting .NET MAUI, so Syncfusion, Telerik, and you can see all here all the guys that are developing a huge library of controls, charts, and graphs. So there's a lot of backing, a lot of support for .NET MAUI. You can see Dev Express here is a good example. Grail Kit, another great one for controls. Here's some examples of the controls that you get with that. And then Sean Lawrence has actually made a game engine with this called Orbit. Highly performant game engine targeting .NET MAUI. So you can see the kind of cool things you can do. Matt has done one of the UI challenges and has created a representation of Outlook, mail client. And then Naweed has created a Wordle clone. And then we have Javier's travel app. This is another example of the kind of UI you can create with MAUI. So this gives you a good flavor of the rich graphical UIs that you can create, rounded edges and all that kind of stuff. And then here's another example. This is the weather app, which was created, Weather 21. David Orton and his team put this together to demonstrate all the capabilities of MAUI running on multiple platforms. You can see you can create some really rich and beautiful applications. And probably the most full-featured and impressive demonstration I've seen so far is the .NET Podcast app, which is actually is both a Blazor app and a .NET app. It's fully hybrid. It supports SignalR, so we have support for communication between each one of these platforms. So James Montemagno did a really impressive demo of this live, demonstrating this app working and replaying the current play state across all of his different devices on an iPhone, Android, and Windows. So yeah, so the capabilities of MAUI are really endless, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys produce with it. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you. Any more questions before we go on to the workshop? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so there's a full animation framework. Yeah, that's interesting. That's not something that we touch on in the slides, but yeah, there's a really feature-rich animation framework in MAUI. So you can actually do things like defining scale. If you want to have like a bounce animation, for example, you can easily do that. So you can affect scale. So you can say, scale this over half a second and then bounce it back, and you can set like tweening. So that kind of thing. So like drag it across the screen and like fling it. I wouldn't know off the top of my head how you'd necessarily do that. Let's see, dragging. So that, yeah, well, yes, yeah, because you'd track the current touch point. So yes, yeah, for that, yes, you could absolutely do that. You could track the current position, so you'd effectively have an absolute layout until they released. And then you'd probably want to figure out some velocity or something like that if you wanted to fling it. So yeah, there's nothing out of the box, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone's produced something, because there are some controls which might be similar. So there's the sorry? Yeah, sliders, exactly. So there's a slider control, which would do something, if that's the functionality you're looking for, then yes, there is something that does exactly that. But if you're looking to like fling an object across, then a little bit more to it than that. But it's totally doable, absolutely. Yeah, good question. Yeah, go on, yeah. Oh, in-app purchase. Is there a way to? Okay, so is there a way to add in-app purchase to your applications? Yes, absolutely, there is. Yeah. So back to the original point about these apps being native. Literally anything that you can do on a native application. So for an iPhone, if you want to add in-app subscription support, you still have to jump through the same hoops that you'd have to on the store side. So there's a bunch of that. Anyone who's had any experience of adding in-app subscription support, any of the kind of extra features, there's a little bit that you have to do on that side, and updating things like the info plist. So that's still a thing in the MAUI world. So you'll still have to make sure that you're registered entitlements. But yeah, once you've done that, you can absolutely add that functionality. So there's no limitation to that at all. It's absolutely possible, yeah. Good question. Any others? He seems to be on a roll now. So.
In terms of app deployment on Windows, does that support deployment just as simply agree, or does it use AppX deployment?
Good question. AppX deployment for Windows. So it's MAUI targets WinUI 3. So I would have to guess, though. My answer would be a guess. Given that we support that same kind of thing on Android, the bundling, in-app bundles, then the equivalent is what you've just described there. So yeah, absolutely, that would be supported. Actually, the AppX, yes, it's the AppX. Yeah.
But if I just want to get a simple easy file, one app, it doesn't seem to like that.
Yes. No, there's, funny enough, I've seen a blog on that exact same thing. So the question was about, can you get access to the XC that is created by the AppX bundle? Is that right? That was essentially, yeah. Yes, there's definitely a way to do that. You have to modify the CS proj, basically. So there's a flag you can tweak on the CS proj, which will say, yeah, don't create this AppX, I just want the XC, and then you can access that. And so yeah, that's the way you could do that. So yeah, good question, yeah. Yes, so we've got a few minutes before we're planning to start the workshop, so we should probably wrap it up there. And oh, yeah, so, sorry. Next slide. So this is the workshop, but we'll break for 5-10 minutes. And then for those who stick around, we can do this workshop, which is pretty easy, but there's a scoring system. It gives you, walks you through some of the basics of creating a MAUI app. And you can create it uses a couple of the basic features of accessing a native API. So you can make an app which makes a phone call for you. And you get some points on the on your live account. Okay. Yes, back at 8. Okay, we're back. So thanks for everyone who stayed. So I'm just gonna talk you through the workshop that we're gonna do. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. Sorry if anyone gets that. So we're gonna run the create a cross-platform app with .NET MAUI. You can see I've got 1,000 points for doing this. So can you. Get a whole 1,000 points. It's fairly straightforward, as long as you've got your dev environment set up with VS 2022. I mean, I see a couple of Macs, so yeah. Good luck with the VS Mac preview if you give it a go. Okay, cool. It should work for this. It should definitely work. It's just yeah. So we have, as you can see, it's super quick. 2 minutes introduction, just talks you through the what the task is, and yeah. So there's some high-level stuff which I've already talked through, so you can you know all this. You're all experts in this now. So the key thing is for Windows to make sure you've selected .NET MAUI platform app UI development as your workload. And then you've got a couple of questions here. Hopefully you can figure out the answers, and then you go through. And at the end, there's 7 pages. At the end of it, you have a task to create your first MAUI app. So that's for people online. If you go to that URL, which was shared, I believe yeah. And yeah, good luck.